So thank you everybody for being here today. As far as Michael and I can figure, this is um, our fifth event, our fifth effort to raise funds for Justice for Medicine. And I guess I'm going to have to wing it because I've lost where I put what I wanted to talk about. But our theme today is our theme today is this the end of our right to free expression? So what we wished we would have been doing, Michael and I it was really, really fun dreaming about this when Michael was working literally through the night after night after night, preparing the Trozzi. Uh, he's got the proper preparing for the last court case, and Michael felt very strongly that he had excellent evidence. We were we were planning the celebration party, which was going to be at a downtown Toronto hotel, and we were going to have 500 people there that we knew would be so excited to share our good news. And then one day, I just probably will both burst into tears. One day, Michael called me and he said, "The decision is in too soon." He said, "I can't even open it." He said, it shouldn't be here this soon. They couldn't possibly have gone over the evidence in the amount of time. And when he finally got the courage to open it, he was right to be discouraged because the evidence wasn't, Michael, I'm sure will be talking about this, but the evidence wasn't even addressed. He himself was slandered, and there were things that were said in the decision that were really very difficult to hear. So here we are, continuing the fight together, not giving up yet, working hard to protect our freedoms. And I guess I'm speaking to the choir because all of you know how urgent it is to be thinking about our freedoms and how precariously they're teetering at the moment. So I hope Mark Trozzi is joining us electronically, and I hope he did get the message that we wanted him to be ready at 2:50. And so I'm going to, let me please give my thanks to Mike Bayer, who, and probably our second attempt to raise funds for Justice for Medicine. It was in a great big Polish hall in Hamilton, and I had got somebody to be in the audience with their cell phone because I wanted to record it. And then this man walks in carrying all the equipment that anybody's ever seen and sets it up. And Mike was there to properly record it. And since then, we've learned how to live stream. So I don't think you won't be seen on the live stream. Which reminds me, I forgot to welcome the live stream audience. So hello and welcome to those of you that are watching us from afar. So Mark Trozzi, as if I really need to introduce him, but I think it's nice to hear again all the amazing work that he's done. He worked for an ER physician for 25 years, and he taught emergency medicine in different medical schools in Ontario. But most of you already know this about him because I've said it every time I've introduced him. Mark has devoted himself to the full-time study of COVID science since the pandemic began. Once he realized things were off, he stopped working as a doctor and he started this research. Most recently, Mark has been involved in a weekend podcast with Ted Kuntz, where they talk about the wins of the week. I see you nodding, so many of you are familiar with this. Michael gives this very high reviews, and he says it is absolutely excellent journalism. In fact, he gives it an 11 out of 10. So if you're not on Mark Trozzi's mailing list and you would like to, it is very nice with all of the things that we're worried about. It's very nice to hear about those wins. He has been a founding member of the World Council for Health, which I expect many of you have heard of, And this was formed as an alternative to the WHO. So now it's 2:50. I'm going to cross my fingers that we don't have Mark. Not yet.
Go on first, I guess.
Michael's got his phone. He's going to be. Do you want to? Can you get it? He knew.
Well, Mark is on his way to his computer. He has to climb a small mountain.
Okay.
So perhaps he fell on the way.
All right.
Stop climbing.
All right. I've already.
He will.
I already did this once before. I'll do it again for those of you that haven't heard. At my daughter and son-in-law's wedding in Mexico, my son-in-law was absolutely green, sick from the food and the water in Mexico, and he had to be excused. So Karina was at the mic, and she had to speak to all the guests. So out of the blue, she comes up with this little story that I'm going to tell you while we're waiting for Mark. So
I'll be a little late if he's working.
okay, so then I'm going to go on with my joke. So a man was sitting in a bar, and a beautiful woman came sidling up beside him, and she said, "Hi, honey, I'm here to offer you super sex." And the gentleman paused and thought about it for a minute, and he said, "I'll take the soup." So I don't know how Karina came up with that on the spur of the moment, but that's the best I can do for now. But I think what we'll do, Michael and Marianne and I had lunch together in Toronto a few weeks ago when we were all feeling particularly despondent. So finally I said, one of us has got to be able to think of some good news. So let's pause and think, who has some good news in terms of, oh, not Marianne, the other Marianne, where is she? Marianne, you told us about a state in the US you thought that had stopped the vaccines completely.
I hope I have the details correct. But yeah, this woman had almost single-handedly, I'm sure she had lots of help, but she had petitioned.
Is there a mic? Have we got an extra mic?
Well, I hope I have the details correct. Well, come and stand up.
You'd like to say hello to the live stream. You're on TV.
Oh, hello, live stream. Oh, man, I really do hope I have.
Or you can't.
Okay, good. I really do hope that I have the details correct, but you can search it up and make sure I haven't misrepresented it. But a woman in one of the states, and I believe it was in the West Coast, she petitioned her Congress to put into legislation that they will never do mandates again or lockdowns and school closings. Idaho. I knew it started with an I, yeah. Do you know more about it, Julie? I don't know. I know something. Do you want to talk to it? Point it this way, I think, away from the speaker.
So,
Actually, put it back. Okay.
so yeah, they worked very hard. It has probably the best medical freedom right now that is in North America. No mandates for anything, including children. They try to stall it on preschool children, and they managed to get that through. It's just an amazing bill, but they worked very hard. And yes, it was more than one woman, but they persevered. So Idaho right now has the best medical freedom, and they're hoping that that bill will be taken up by other states.
And Julie, why can't we take a copy of that and start petitioning our government?
There's nothing to stop us.
I'm interested if anybody else is interested.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the name of the lady. When it comes to me, I'll let you know.
Yeah.
What is it? Leslie Manuka?
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, yeah. She was just a force to reckon with. It's an amazing bill. Yeah.
Thank you, Julie. I just realized that we have somebody in our midst that is doing, I know many of us are doing amazing work, but Sheila, do you want to come and speak just for fill in the space for the
I'd be honored.
Okay, I'm going to give, I haven't got a prepared introduction for Sheila, but Sheila's from Guelph, and Sheila has been doing incredible work making presentations to city councils to help them understand the dangers of the 15-minute cities. Because, as we all know, many people think that they're just the best thing since sliced bread. So I've watched some of Sheila's videos, and just it's been very, very exciting to watch city councils perk up and ask questions and start to think a little more. So do you want to take a few minutes?
Let me just put this mic right here. Yeah.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sheila McFarlane. I'm the author of the POG Primer. Some of you people might know me. I go by Sheila Hunter on Facebook. POG, P-O-G-G, is an acronym for Peace, Order, and Good Governance. It's a doctrine in law that states that any government that is legislating for you, their legislation must be in complete alignment with peace, order, and good governance for them to be valid and for the government to be legitimate. So what we have now are illegitimate governments. They're corporations masquerading as governments at all three levels: federal, provincial, and local. I've always been involved at the local level. I've been involved for about 20 years now. Both me and my late husband have been very active fighting this Agenda 21 because it comes down from the global to the local level, and COVID proved it. They launched the mandates in CERN or Geneva, and then it's 2 weeks to flatten the curve. That was a test run for how fast the local areas could get a bylaw passed in City Hall that would legislate injections for the entire geographical area of that local area. So my focus has always been on taking back control of your local area, because that, in my opinion, is your only government. I'm a firm believer that the Crown Corporation that masquerades as Canada Inc., that only has two levels of government, federal and provincial, I believe that service jurisdiction has captured the local level of government, and in so doing has captured law and order and entire fiduciary powers. So my first publication was in 2023 when I started seeing, I ran for councillor in 2014 in Kincardine to try to stop the agenda. United Nations was trying to bury nuclear waste beside Lake Huron. The Ontario Power Generation was holding secret mayor meetings with Mayor Larry Kramer in Kincardine. And I found out about United Nations public-private partnerships. What a United Nations public-private partnership is that they get the public trustee, and in this case, it's your mayor in the local area, and they combine him with a private municipal officer, which is your CAOs, your chief administrative officers. And those two positions, those two gentlemen can get into one room and mandate anything in the area. They can call an emergency for any reason whatsoever, which we saw in COVID. Scary virus, shut down, shut down. That was the mayors doing that. They ultimately had to sign the local emergency orders. And what that local emergency order did is it transferred geographical jurisdiction into the World Health Organization, granting them permission to perform clinical trials within that area on 100% of the population. And there was nothing the people could do, right? We had no courts, we had no cops, we had no doctors that could do anything, no nurses that could do anything, no mothers that could do anything. So I had gone kind of a little bit underground after I lost the election in 2014. My husband ran for mayor in 2014 in tandem with me for Huron-Kinloss, a little village side by each to Kincardine, because we knew the power of the agenda, and we also knew the power of the office of the mayor. We both lost the election, but we sure as hell learned a lot, that all elections are rigged. I actually won the 2014 election for Ward 3 in Kincardine, and I won 769 votes to 133 against the incumbent. I have the screenshot from the radio station. The next morning, I log on to Facebook, and one of my friends is saying, "Hey, who won last night? Because I went to bed and Sheila won, and I wake up and Randy Ropels won." And I'm going, "What the, huh?" And sure enough, they switched the votes overnight. And Randy Ropel got in as Ward 3 councillor. Me and my friend went down that morning to the clerk and said, "What the huh?" And the clerk said, "Take it to court." And both my late husband and I know that court is a pretty dead end. And by the time you could get it anywhere, that 4 years would be up, that counselor would be done, and the damage would be done too. So, well, my husband ended up taking his life 4 years later because he had gone down every rabbit hole from the monetary system, the creature of Jekyll Island, all the way down, and ultimately tried to discharge his birth certificate, tried to do all the sovereign shit that you see around now, tried to do the UCC filings, all of it, and none of it worked. Ultimately, he took his life. So I went underground. 2020, though, when I saw COVID hit and I realized that they were doing exactly what my husband said, they were using these mayors and secret mayor meetings, getting online in Zoom conversations with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So I started getting vocal again in 2020. I went straight to my mayor's house because I believe a public trustee, you serve them at their house. They're not a corporate officer. They're supposed to be working for the men and women in the geographical area, not for the crown subjects, not for King Chuck. So I went down to my mayor immediately when COVID started, and he didn't understand. Cam Guthrie, mayor of Guelph, is an insurance broker. So this went way over his head. So I did a few events, the protests, had Kellyanne Wolf come to Guelph. We did some information, whatever, about the COVID shots and, the restrictions, and you guys don't have to apply. And I was holding some meetings downtown Guelph, and how I got out of restrictions is I simply wrote an email to the solicitor, the CAO, and the clerk, and CC'd my mayor. And I simply said, "Hey, there's some men and women, and we're going to be meeting in such and such a place. Do you have a problem with that?" And the fact that I said men and women, the CAO came back and said the city does not plan to interfere with those individuals, because he knew I understood legalese. I was trained in the 90s by lawyers in Toronto, honest lawyers, and they taught me legalese. They taught me the power of your signature, power of standing and status, and how it gets converted. And so anyway, 2022, I went to the truckers convoy. I was fortunate enough to drive right in front. Oh, 2 more minutes. Oh, wow. Okay. Anyway, I ran for mayor in 2022 after the truckers convoy. I went straight to my mayor again because the truckers proved that there was de facto possession of Canada by the United Nations. They collapsed the federal level, the provincial level, and the municipal level all within a week. They exposed it all. And so I went immediately to my mayor with the proof that United Nations had de facto possession and he had a duty to step in. He called the cops on me, so I decided to run against him in the election in the following fall. So I'm on the ballot for 2022 mayor of Guelph. And if that mayor is sitting in de facto possession of that office, then I can challenge him. So my second publication now, the POG protocol, is how candidates can challenge that last local election, or how sitting councillors can now step into their official duties as public trustees. So I'm meeting now with sitting councillors and candidates in Ontario, and very successful. I'll be up in Huntsville and Haliburton next week. So if there's any towns that have a councillor that wants to talk to me on how they get out of the agenda safely and their area out, please have them contact me, editor@sheila.ca. And if you have a candidate that's willing to stand, we've got Barry Thongman's willing to stand for Barry, City of Barry, because he's on the ballot for mayor. Please contact me and we'll get together and I'll walk you through how to do it. So that's coming, people. We have a duty to stop de facto possession of our country, and breach of trust and breach of public security, and de facto possession of our courts and our law. And we have a duty to restore peace, order, and good governance. So thanks.
Sheila, thank you so much. That was great. So First of all, do you know why you're all squeezed in here? Because every time I looked at the weather report since for a week, no, for 14 days, I've been looking at the 14-day forecast. And every day, right up until yesterday, it said it was going to rain all afternoon. And look, although it might be a little chilly for sitting outside, but anyway, is anybody too hot? Because I'm going to open only me because I'm running around. So my bad. I was supposed to introduce Derek Sloan first. I got mixed up. Mark isn't scheduled to speak until after Derek, but Derek is at a tournament with one of his kids and looks like he's lost track of the time because we haven't seen him. But I'm going to tell you about him anyway, because is everybody familiar with Derek Sloan? Is there anybody that doesn't know who he is? Yeah, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about him because he's been very, very supportive, and we've all been we've been all working towards the same goal for a very long time. The other thing, because I wasn't welcoming you, there's soft drinks and there's water and there's ice on the table. So if anybody else is as thirsty as I am, please help yourself to a drink. No, I'll get my drinking bottle inside. Thank you. Anyway, so maybe so what's going to happen if we can't find Derek is Michael's just going to go ahead and he's going to speak. But Derek Sloan is a lawyer and a former member of Parliament and currently the leader of the Ontario Party. Derek was the first politician in the country to hold a press conference with leading scientists and doctors to provide a critical look at the measures taken by our governments to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. As the leader of the Ontario Party, Derek is dedicated to standing up for truth and medical science, freedom of expression for all Canadians, and has worked tirelessly to raise money for those who are fighting legal battles against the government or who have been mistreated in matters related to COVID-19 and the pandemic. I don't know whether you get his newsletter, but he does have a newsletter, and he's working tirelessly on behalf of those who have been oppressed and have been really been treated badly. And he might yet show up. But anyway, we were really happy that we were going to have Mark and Derek to join Michael today for this. But now I'm going to introduce Michael Alexander, who really needs no introduction at all, except that I'm just going to review what you probably already know. For the last 4.5 years, Michael Alexander has dedicated his law practice to fighting for freedom of expression for healthcare professionals across the country. He has represented, amongst others, Dr. Mark Trozzi, Dr. Phillips, Dr. Chris Shoemaker, Dr. Crystal Luxke, Charles Off, Roger Hodgkinson, you know who I mean, Hodgkinson, and more. He notably had early success in getting all charges dismissed with Dr. Chris Melbourne in Nova Scotia. This is our 5th fundraising endeavor to help Justice for Medicine, because each and every one of those doctors had lost their livelihood, and so in many cases were unable to pay for their legal counsel. So Michael has worked tirelessly. At some times he's had some help from the Constitutional Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. But much of the time, he's been devoting his own unpaid hours and paying bills out of his own pocket. And after Mark's case, the reason we're having this fundraiser today is because when Mark's case was done, with the very unhappy ending that we found, it turned out there were still many, many bills left unpaid. And I said, well, we're good at fundraising. Let's just call on our loyal and true people who all who share in these views that these are very important things to be aiming for and to be looking after. So without further ado, I introduce you to, or I bring Michael Alexander to the mic.
Very good. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out. I wanted to begin today by taking you back to early 2021.
And at that time, I joined the Justice Center out in Calgary as their senior constitutional litigator. And my mandate was to recruit dissenting doctors all across the country, doctors dissenting from the COVID narrative who needed legal assistance. So I recruited 9 doctors, some of them have already been mentioned, and created a medical practice, as it were, for them, based on the defense of charter rights and based on a critical view of the pandemic and all COVID measures. And my early observation about how to approach these cases was based on a couple of cases that we were arguing out west. And what we discovered is that the courts were not going to listen to expert evidence, nor would the tribunals that we were appearing before at that time. So we could bring in great experts, but when the government brought in its experts, they always got the benefit of the doubt. Not surprising. My theory of the case was, or of these cases was, forget about the science, because all of these different bodies and agencies and governments that we were fighting were operating outside of their jurisdiction. They were operating unlawfully. And this is the first thing that struck me as I started working on these cases. No matter where I went, Nova Scotia, Ottawa, Saskatoon, Vancouver, Alberta, Calgary, and Edmonton, every organization I dealt with was working outside the bounds of the law. So I felt we could actually win the cases by arguing that these various authorities were acting without jurisdiction, without lawful power. And so we kind of left the science behind and decided to argue these cases based on the first principles of public law and based on the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And I think that was a sound strategy. But there have been a couple of victories recently for our doctors that put an ironic twist on our efforts. You probably know that Dr. Charles Hoff had all charges dismissed against him before the college in British Columbia. And Dr. Gill here in Ontario had all charges dismissed against her. In fact, they withdrew the notice of hearing at the last moment. Why did that happen? Strangely enough, it happened because these people were going to win on the science. But they were able to win on the science for a specific reason. So when it came to Dr. Gill, she got funding from the Democracy Fund and from Elon Musk, and then she had some people come forward to assist her pro bono based on goodwill. Normally, you only get 3 expert witnesses in Ontario. That's the law of evidence here. You can argue for more witnesses, but you have to make a compelling case. Well, Dr. Gill's lawyer did a good job of arguing for 6, 7, 8 expert witnesses, something like that. They were very well funded. They produced incredible reports. And so they really overwhelmed the college with the science. And the college realized they couldn't win, and it just backed off at the last moment. The same thing happened with Dr. Hoff. Dr. Hoff had 8 expert witnesses. They produced excellent reports. They all worked for him on a pro bono basis, so he was able to afford this approach. And again, the same thing happened. At the last moment, the college in BC said, "Oh, we're not going to prosecute this anymore." So strangely, what we've learned from this is that the way to fight these cases at the lower level is just to line up as many expert witnesses as you can, if you can afford it, if you have the goodwill. In Mark's case, we weren't able to do that. We didn't have enough money. We didn't have enough time. We did have to pay one of our expert witnesses. It was quite exorbitant, and she unfortunately was disqualified. But we did not have, at that point, the resources or the support to mount that kind of defense. So unfortunately, even if we had wanted to take the science route, we just didn't have the people behind us at that point. Dr. Gill and Dr. Hoff took advantage of the fact that there was a kind of momentum building around the science, and they came in at a later point than Mark did, and were able to take advantage of that momentum and bring people on their side. Of course, when Elon Musk gets behind you and writes you a check, that helps too, right? If Elon Musk had written us a check, we could have mounted a very strong case based on the science as well. So my recommendation today to anybody facing off against a college or the government in a COVID matter, anyone who's a health professional, find a way to assemble 8 expert witnesses who will write killer reports, because the science is on our side, and the authorities are beginning to realize that. Okay, so if you're fortunate enough to be in that position, that is one way to win. But we should have been able to win on the law, and that's the disappointing part. The Trozzi case is profoundly disappointing in a number of different ways. The first is that the college really proceeded against Mark based on guidelines and recommendations, not principles of law or established standards of practice. The Ontario Court of Appeal has said that recommendations and guidelines and statements do not have the force of law. So you can't prosecute somebody for failing to adhere to a recommendation or a statement or a guideline. This isn't just true for the College of Physicians, it's true for all administrative bodies, like the Securities Commission. It's a very basic principle. Yet the college got away with prosecuting all of these doctors based on their non-adherence to recommendations, statements, and guidelines. I've twice asked the Ontario courts to call out the College of Physicians on this issue, and they refused to do it. And they refused to do it in Mark's case. They refused also to do it in Crystal Lutchku's case. So this is a big problem. When you say that these administrative bodies can just make up the law by printing a guideline and then prosecute on that basis, then you're living in a tyrannical society. But our Ontario courts have said, that's fine. We'll live with that. The other disappointing thing about Mark's case was the position taken on free expression. We argued, based on the charter and other principles, that it's wrong in itself to censor somebody simply for expressing an alternative point of view on medical science, or anything for that matter. And the court ruled, almost summarily, that during a public health emergency, anything goes. If an administrative body wants to censor its members, in particular, if a professional body wants to censor its members in order to advance a public health objective, it can. So that's the ruling. But where do you find the grounding for that? Do you find it in a statute? Do you find it in a regulation? This is the big mystery in Mark's case. It's just a general principle. I argued that the Ontario version of the Emergency Act, our Emergency Act, it doesn't give the government the right to curtail anybody's free expression during a public emergency. The provincial government doesn't have that power. That power also does not exist in the Reopening Ontario Act. It also doesn't explicitly exist in the Regulated Health Professions Act, which governs our 22 health professions in Ontario. So where does this power to censor come from? If the government, during an emergency, under its own emergency legislation, does not have the right to censor, how is it that these administrative bodies and regulatory colleges have the right to censor? That is unexplained in this case. So really, the case is just an endorsement of the view that the administrative state is running this province. And in particular, these professional colleges will be given a great deal of deference by the courts to do whatever they think is necessary once somebody uses the words public emergency. Now, the third disappointing aspect of Mark's case is that it goes further even than this ruling about what these bodies can do during public emergencies. The court said that when somebody joins a professional body, they agree to give up their right to free expression. So think about it. I don't remember when I'm a lawyer, when I took my oath as a lawyer back in 1990, I don't remember anybody saying to me or reading anything that said, "You're now joining this profession and you have given up your right to free expression to the benchers at the Law Society." You can't find that anywhere in our legislation. You can't find that anywhere in the Regulated Health Professions Act. But now we have a new ruling that when you join a profession in Ontario, you give up your right to free expression. And if your professional body says to you, "This is what we want you to say," or "This is what you must say," and you disagree with us, they can take away your license. So this is radical. I never dreamed that the court would go this far. Unfortunately for us, the presiding judge in our case was a judge who had been in charge of COVID-19 matters for the courts in Ontario. So I think he was closely connected with the COVID-19 Action Committee, which was the group of judges and politicians put together in Ottawa to make policy regarding COVID-19 for the courts. And they did something more than just establish protocols, safety protocols. I think it's quite clear in retrospect that they had discussions about how they were going to deal with these cases. And in fact, I have some anecdotal evidence about that. I was speaking to a lawyer in Alberta who I've known for quite some time, who has a colleague, and the colleague was on a COVID-19 case in Alberta, and he was in chambers with the Associate Chief Justice of the Alberta court system. And the judge told him that, I don't know what the request was, but the lawyer was making a request for some sort of relief in relation to that case. And the judge said, "I cannot entertain it." He said that a message had been sent down through the system by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court that these COVID-19 cases were to go away. Okay. So this is another example of rule taking place behind the scenes, behind closed doors. Decisions are made that fundamentally affect our rights, and we are not even aware of how they're being made for the most part and who's making them. So as a lawyer, this is very disturbing. And it creates a real problem for us going forward, here in Ontario in particular, because a precedent has been set. On a more positive note, Paul Slansky, who is quite an extraordinary criminal lawyer with a strong expertise in constitutional law, has been making arguments at the CPSO on behalf of Dr. Killian and Dr. Cuscu regarding the college's demand that they give up patient files because they have been writing medical exemptions for COVID-19 shots. And Paul has written a factum, a legal brief in support of both doctors, which is one of the greatest briefs I have ever read in my life by a Canadian lawyer. Paul is an extraordinarily learned person, and he has rolled out some arguments that I have made, but he is really focusing on this issue of whether the college can just demand, if there's an investigation, that a doctor turn over all of her records to the college for the purposes of review. It's quite an extraordinary power, which the courts have put their blessing on quite some time ago, but Paul has called it into question. And I think he's done an excellent job of it. Now, the college will rule against him, but he could take this brief into the court system and perhaps make a difference with it. I have encouraged him to go to appeal. I don't know if he will, whether that's part of the plan, but I have some hope that if his arguments get into the court system, that he might make some difference to the situation we're in, at least in terms of the breadth of the investigative powers of the college. And that would be of some assistance to us in the future, because the college counts on the fact that they can just show up at your door once they get an investigation order and take whatever they want. Paul says, no, you can't do that. It's contrary to basic criminal law, and basic criminal law should be in play in this kind of situation, because the college actually exercises criminal law powers when it conducts an investigation. So I think we should look out for that. Something might happen there that could be positive. So I'd like to tell you just briefly about some of the cases that I'm arguing right now. And they're not on behalf of healthcare professionals. They are on behalf of municipal politicians. We have established a new system here in Ontario um, based on a code of conduct. Every municipal council in the province can draft a code of conduct to ensure that their members are behaving ethically. And each municipality can appoint an integrity commissioner, usually a lawyer, to police our municipal politicians. So anybody can make a complaint against a politician based on a code of conduct. And if that happens, then there can be an investigation. What's insidious about this whole setup is that these codes of conduct contain provisions prohibiting bullying and intimidation, which is fine in itself. But integrity commissioners are using that provision to accuse people who are in the minority on councils, who are not in tune with the progressive, you might say, momentum that exists in municipal politics in the province. So people who are in the minority are being prosecuted and having their salaries suspended simply for expressing an alternative point of view, a point of view that does not agree with the majority of council members. So I am taking the same arguments that I made on behalf of free expression in Mark's case and in the Crystal Lutchku case, and I'm using it to defend these municipal councillors against the integrity commissioners. I argued on behalf of Councillor Lisa Robinson. I guess the hearing was September 18th. It's been almost 8 months since I argued that case. And I put it in front of the court that the case law under the Constitution properly considered stands for the proposition that government cannot censor somebody simply for expressing an alternative point of view, especially about matters of public importance. So I argued for an untrammeled right to free expression in political matters. And I got a very good reception from the court on that. And I think we are almost 8.5 months out now from the hearing because they are grappling with whether to set a precedent around this view of free expression in Ontario. And so what I'm trying to do through the back door is get a recognition for this approach, this way of thinking about the right to free expression under the Charter in a way, in another case that might be brought forward to help healthcare professionals in the future. So they may be taking 8 months because I'm sure the members of this court know that I've been arguing on behalf of doctors and I've been making these free expression arguments, and I put them in a difficult situation. So I'm hoping they'll do the right thing. I'm hoping we'll see a decision within the next month or two. It's very, very unusual to have to wait 8.5 months for a decision. On Wednesday, I'm going to argue a companion case for a counselor in my hometown of Chatham, Kent. Very similar principles. And so I'm going to take a second kick at that can. And so then there's going to be a problem for the court. We've got the Trozzi decision here, which shuts down free expression in a fundamental way and refuses to recognize basic free expression cases that have been respected in the courts for the past 80 years. So we've got that happening. On the other hand, we have these two other cases, which could stand in contradiction with Mark's case. So the court's going to have to do some heavy thinking here to reconcile these different approaches to free expression. I'm hoping we will get a ruling that returns us to an earlier understanding, which is the right to free expression in political matters is absolute. Now, as to Mark Carney, he has already made the statement that he is going to continue prosecuting the war against misinformation. He's in favor of the online harms bill. So we are going to have a disinformation czar in Ottawa who is going to police what we can see and what we can say on the internet. We're also going to have probably the passing of the One Health bill or amendments to it if it has passed already, which allows the government to get involved in all aspects of our lives, all the different policy areas of government with a view to combating climate change. And so we're going to see an approach to government that is really more draconian and more severe than we saw under Trudeau, but in particular in relation to free expression. So I am deeply concerned about that. And Carney has even made the remark that he may establish a protest police force in Ottawa to guard against the possibility of another protest. So we have to keep our eyes open and remain vigilant about what the federal government is going to do. The mission here in Ontario is to stay strong in the courts with cases that might help us, like the ones that I've been fighting recently. And we need political action because some of the problems we have here in Ontario could be solved by our politicians if they wanted to make clear that these administrative bodies that govern us in our daily lives cannot make up the law and act on it simply because they want to. Okay, thanks everybody.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, well, we believe we've got, we're very close to having Mark Trozzi with us. The camera on? Oh, Mark, hello. I've already given you a really lovely introduction. That was, I got mixed up what time I was expecting you, and then you weren't there, obviously, because I got it wrong. But anyway, you've been introduced. So we're going to just put it over to you. And Michael's amazing technical abilities. I just can't help but, the World Wide Web still fascinates me. And here we are. Mark is in another country, and this is being broadcast around the world for anybody that may be wanting to join us. So it's pretty amazing, the technology. Okay, good to see you, Mark.
Thanks, Barbara. It's nice to see you too, and thanks for holding us. Can you hear me okay? I wish I could see you all. I wish someone take the other camera and turn it around a bit so I see who I'm talking with. Hey, everyone. Oh, that's much nicer. I'd much rather see you guys. I wish I was there with you. As you know, the journey to restore medical health rights just kind of got me all over the world these days. But thanks so much for coming out. And I feel bad that I had computer troubles. I wanted to join and listen to Barbara and Michael and Derek, and I didn't get a chance to, so now I do. Well, I think the most important word that we could focus on, in my opinion, was first expressed by one of the greatest doctors in Ontario, in my opinion, Dr. Roshane Killian. And this was at the time when Dr. Killian and I were being mocked by the prostitute media financed through your taxes by whichever version of the WEF is running the government at the time. And we were mocked because we said, this is not a vaccine, it's a genetic experiment. And now everyone knows that's true. And that's one of the reasons we came under attack. But a little longer in that process, as you know, Francis Christian, Michael Alexander, Roshane Killian, Patrick Phillips, and others were meeting and saying, what are we going to do? Our population is in the process currently of being poisoned with extreme toxin and lied to and coerced. It's all crimes against humanity. It's all acts of medical assault. It cannot be made lawful. And at that time, Roshane said, we are in a crisis of legitimacy. And let's slide forward in the story. And I think, you know, you guys are people who have been studying, you know what's going on. So we don't need to go back to the beginning and say, what are the ingredients in a vaccine versus what are the ingredients in this? You guys know this thing's been a radical, dangerous genetic experiment. Forgive me a moment just to capture my thought. So what's happened? And we've mapped this all out. There's tons of evidence. You could go on drtrozzi.news and search. You can go to the World Council for Health and search. You could search everyone from Dr. David Martin to Dr. Peter McCullough to James Thorpe and Robert Malone and Tess Laurie. Like, The evidence is mountainous. In fact, just last week, Philip Cruz, who on the global scale, Michael knows Philip, on the global scale, Philip Cruz is probably one of he's one of the leading lawyers against the crimes against humanity committed in the name of COVID and with the excuse of health. And just last week, I understand, and I'm waiting to talk to him directly, that Philip said, I'm throwing in the towel because the courts don't work. I've presented 30,000 pages of evidence. So when we step back and look, we have fraud committed by the Public Health Agency of Canada. And if you know, the contract that Pfizer, for instance, was signed along with, and I wish I had her name because she's guilty of sin at the tip of my tongue, who signed on behalf of all of us Canadian taxpayers, signed the contract with Pfizer. That contract, it was quite clear. There was no proof that it blocked infection. There was no proof that it blocked transmission. There was no proof of safety in women or pregnancy. And yet, after they signed that contract, meaning they knew exactly the facts, they turned to the Canadian people and said, this is a safe and effective vaccine. And in this power struggle, or power structure, I should say, the colleges of physicians and surgeons became the muscle that held the doctors hostages. And doctors were given a choice, which is either you shut up and go along with this, stop asking questions, stop reading ingredients, just believe us that you're not smart enough as a doctor to advise your patients. You're going to tell them what we tell you to say. And you say safe and effective vaccine. And since then, I mean, myself, when I first read the ingredients, and forgive me, I tell this story a little too often, but when I read the ingredients of these injections in the fall of 2020, before anyone was injected, I knew that this was fraud. I knew this was medical assault. I knew the public was being lied to, and there was absolutely no reasonable prediction of benefit. There was only prediction of harm. For instance, mRNA injections had only ever been given to less than 400 human subjects in experiments, and all of them were failures, both as vaccines and therapeutics. It was a known infinite tissue penetration device, these pegylated lipid nanoparticles, loaded with genetic code to cause human cells to make coronavirus parts, the most toxic part, the most weaponized part, the patented furin cleavage site, etc., modification of a natural coronavirus to create this toxic thing. And as much as the coronavirus was a real virus, people got sick. People like Patrick Phillips and myself and others who tried to treat them came under attack by the colleges for using safe and effective approved medicines to treat COVID. And the death was maximized as much as possible from COVID. And more so, death was falsified so that people that died of other things were claimed to have died of COVID. This is one of the reasons Crystal Luchke come under attack, because she refused to commit fraud on a death certificate, which had become the norm in her hospital. And so at that point, I realized that if I could save one life, whether it was a grandmother or a child, it doesn't matter. If I could save one life by telling people the truth, then it was worth whatever the risk is. And I still believe that, and I don't regret it by any stretch. And so I set down everything, the house, the investments, because I knew all the doctors were being held with handcuffs. They call them golden handcuffs. You got a mortgage, you got payments, you got a nice car, don't you? You're only going to keep those things if you keep your license, because that's the trough you feed at. And now you're being told to lie to people or to lie to yourself. Imagine these doctors injected themselves, their wives, their staff. I mean, the nightmare as they wake up to realize what they've done, if they can. And so, having stepped away from clinical practice to do human rights work and warn the world and do the best I can, and immediately did just that. I went to Rebel News. I said, I'm going to tell as many people as I possibly can to watch out, check the ingredients, don't take the shot without thinking about it. You're being lied to. And what we've seen since then is the college must know the facts. I mean, Dr. Whitmore is not only got a full grade 9 biology, but she's a doctor. I met a guy in a gym at Barrie. I was in Barrie at the swimming pool when we went up. Chris Shoemaker and I went up and tried to save Crystal Lucci's practice from the parasites at the college. And a man in the locker room that we used to go in the morning and swim lengths, and he said, you know, I looked at that injection and I said, wait a minute, messenger RNA, that's a genetic thing. I remember biology from high school. That's not a vaccine. So how could anyone claim? How could a doctor who's the head of the college? How could scientists or doctors working at Public Health Agency of Canada? How could a minister of health with a medical degree who's there because supposedly they're going to follow the Hippocratic Oath, which means do their best job and advise the public and advise their patients honestly to the benefit of the patient, not the benefit of the mass public, right? I'm not supposed to convince my patients, hey, if you'll stop eating, that'll save food for others. No, that's not a doctor's job. A doctor's job is not to kill people. Doctor's job is not population control. And the medical establishment has been completely hijacked into that. I'm very sure of my facts. I've done my homework. I've worked nonstop for 5 years. And to be honest, there was a point early on in this where the network of doctors that I'm part of working around the world on this, many doctors were coming under attack in World Economic Forum occupied regions like Canada, Australia, etc. And a lot of them just walked away from their license. They said, retire. And my good friend Tess Laurie, my good friend and hero Tess Laurie said, Mark, just walk away, just retire. Francis Christian just retired. What a shame for Saskatchewan and Canadians to lose an amazing surgeon, the founder of the Surgical Humanities Journal and Department, the founder of quality control for the University of Saskatchewan. And when he said part of quality control is telling people what's in a shot before you stick it in their kids, they went after him and he retired. And it was a good way to go. And Tess and others said, Mark, you're not going to win. It's all rigged. Just walk away and carry on with the important work we're doing, building new institutions, building the World Council for Health. And I thought, you may be right. And Michael, of course, I love Michael because Michael's philosophy, as I understand it, is the law should make sense. And things that are good, things that are righteous, things that are kind, things that are not evil, things that are not corrupt, that those things should be supported by the law. And Michael looks and tries to take the law and get it to serve the purpose of supporting what is true and good. And so Michael was motivated, and I said, you know what? As a resuscitation doctor, that's what I did for 27 years without any troubles until this toxic injection was being rolled out. As a resuscitation doctor, I kind of have a reputation for running the code longer than many. In other words, you get someone in and it appears they're dead. And, you might run a code for a couple of minutes and say, well, this person's dead. And sometimes, if you look at the data, the statistics about the situation, it may be true, but I always ran codes longer than usual, unless it was just abusing somebody who wanted to leave this world. And, it didn't always work. Sometimes I'd work on a person for half an hour when the team would have been ready to call it quits in 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And sometimes at the end of that half hour, we would have some luck. I'd see some subtle cardiac movement, maybe sometimes just a bump within the waves of the ECG sequence that I was seeing from the compressions. And a few times, we were able to see a child, pink, breathing, transfer them to an intensive care unit for further care. And it didn't always work out. And sometimes I had to leave the resuscitation room and talk to the family and tell them, hey, I'm so sorry. We did everything we could. But your child or your mother or your wife or your father, or your brother, or your friend, they're no longer with us that way. And honestly, that was the spirit. At no point have I become a lawyer in this. I'm not a lawyer. I'm a doctor. But that was the spirit. And that's what I told my friends. And actually, some of the other doctors, I said, hold back. Don't Don't get engaged. I'll run the code. I will walk the gauntlet. I will go with Michael Alexander, and we will go to the court. We will go through their kangaroo court. We will go through their abuse. We will tell them that though I've already put everything I own into the war, they want another $100,000 from me. My family's paid a lot for this. We haven't had a vacation in 5 years. It's a lot of work being a real doctor now. There's no pay, but it's a lot of work. Doing the research, how are we going to cure these people posing from these jabs, and all the work we do. And we went there, and as I see it, they spit in our faces. I don't know if any of you watched those hearings, but Michael went in there and made very strong arguments of science. The science is very clear on this, guys. If you haven't seen ever, the closest thing we've had to a debate was Byron Bridle and Dr. Austin. The closest thing we've had to a debate, and it becomes very obvious that Dr. Bridle knows what he's talking about. We're not making this up. It's not like one day thousands of doctors around the world became psychotic with the same delusional belief that they're trying to kill off and sterilize the population with these shots. This is real. And the court spit in our faces. And I had to leave that long resuscitation, which was very costly in many ways, and tell you, in my opinion, the courts are dead. Or, as Bruce Pardy's explained to me more recently, this system was never meant to work. Bruce Pardy told me recently, people think the system's broken. And Bruce Pardy said, unfortunately, it's not broken. This is how it's designed. And now that we have someone evil enough infiltrated into our government and running our government, that they can do this through the old system. So, Mark Carney is not my prime minister. The Corporation of Canada is not our government. We have criminals running an old corporation. We have to take them seriously. They are truly dangerous, but none of it's legitimate. I mean, if a government can commit mass medical assault, mass murder, cover up the evidence, bury the data that it happened, torture every nurse from Shajunian to Nagel and doctor from Patrick Phillips to Daniel Negassi, anyone who won't go along with, unquestionably it was medical assault, it always will be. That's not a legitimate government. We have to reject it. I don't know exactly what we do. We've got to play very careful. Like if you live in a town, let's say you live in a nice town and a criminal gang moves into town and they start breaking into people's houses. They start beating people up on the street. There's plenty of them. They got gangs. You could say, hey, you guys aren't the legitimate heads of our town. And they aren't. But you have to take them serious. You have to deal with them. We have to deal with these criminals. But they're not our government. It's not your College of Physicians and Surgeons. It's not your College of Nursing. It's all become a scam. And that's why we're working to build new things. And I mean, a couple of those that stand out. The National Citizens Inquiry is the beginning of courts in Canada again. Now, it has no power to prosecute, but at least Canadians can start to come together, can bring some intelligent people who are going to be honest, as opposed to meat puppets calling judicial notice of things that are so important and need to be looked at. And we can look and listen to experts and listen to witnesses and take testimony and decide what's going on. So the NCI for me is the closest thing we have to a legitimate court in Canada, and it's a beginning. The World Council for Health Canada, the Canada Health Alliance, these are the beginnings of legitimate health care. Now, friends, you have to understand, with Patrick Phillips and Roshane Killian and Chris Shoemaker and Mary O'Connor, that's just in Ontario, some of them. With them having been demonstratively stripped of their medical license in front of all the other doctors, the doctors who fell under the mind control or who chose money over God during the last segue, they're not going to do better the next time. They're going to do worse. And the next time's already here. Right now, somebody within a kilometer of where you're sitting right now is being injected with pegylated lipid nanoparticles with tens of trillions of copies of foreign genetic code and invasive DNA that's not even supposed to be there. Their life will be shorter, their fertility will be shorter, and some of them will die very soon. That's happening right now. How is that legitimate? It's not. It's not. I wish I had all the answers, but I can tell you denial is never the answer. Now, I have lots of respect for Michael and for others who are going to go back into what I now consider haunted houses called the courts of the Corporation of Canada. And, you know, I think I appreciate the support for this. I think it is important. You know, I don't know if Michael's expressed this all, but the reality is Michael put in all his time and energy. And of course, I spent my life savings and all my assets, and I'm still fighting this, and I will never stop fighting this until I know that our grandchildren have a hope somewhere. But of course, the Corporation of Canada has swooped in and said, hey, guess what? Michael Alexander, you owe a whole bunch of taxes now too on those donations people put together to fight us in the court. You think about how crazy that is. Does anybody remember? Did anybody of you know someone when you were a kid who was a real sick bugger and used to grab a child by their arms and smack them in the face with their own hands? Anybody ever see that? I knew one guy used to do that to me when I was a little kid, friend of my brother's, big guy. That's a really evil thing to do. You know, to force someone to hurt themselves with their own hands. But the Corporation of Canada is taxing you, paying prosecutors, paying judges who have been sold out, clearly. And then you have to raise money to pay lawyers to try to stand up for our rights, to fight against them. It is an absolute illegitimate circus. And so, what can I offer as solutions and answers? Well, one, I want to first start in the medical realm. Don't let anyone stick another needle in you or anyone in your family ever again. At this point now, we've got people looking through microscopes at stuff. I didn't have a problem with a lot of, I was worried when I saw what the ingredients were in these shots. Turned out they was worse. And I've published about it every step of the way. I have informed you the science. And that's kind of the funny thing, guys, if you think about it. The college said, Dr. Mark Trozzi, Dr. Patrick Phillips, you're going to either shut up and toe the line, or you're not going to be allowed to see 40 patients a day and potentially tell them truth that may save their life and their family against the mass murder culling that we're carrying out. But here's the funny thing. When you take off the golden gloves, the golden handcuffs, that's what I did. When I sold the home, when I paid off the debt and said, okay, I know how to live cheap. I started talking to thousands of people a day. Now, I miss my beautiful life. I loved riding my bicycle to the hospital, taking great care of people for long hours. You know, if somebody came, crashed their car, I would work around the clock. I would end up in the back of an ambulance in a snowstorm with somebody on a ventilator and bring them to a thoracic surgeon. I did very good work. I'm a very good person for someone to see if you're hurt or injured or sick in an emergency department. I know that. I did it for 27 years. Go to Bancroft or anywhere I worked and ask people on the street, how's that Dr. Trozzi? And they'll tell you the stories. But what is needed right now more than anything is for people to know the truth. Is for the one way we can avoid being coerced is at least somebody tell you the truth. That's not a vaccine. That's super dangerous. Vitamin D works. There's treatments for COVID. Here's ways to detoxify against these poisonous injections. And I'm doing all that work. And so they can cut us off from having use of the facilities you pay for so that we can serve you. And they can cut us off from being able to receive our paychecks also from your taxes that you pay to have a doctor there. But they can't stop us from following the Hippocratic Oath. And they can't stop us from following the Golden Rule. And that makes life simple. Do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. If my neighbor was a plumber and he knew that the town was getting ready to poison the drinking water with something, and they were going to say it was a new good cleaner that was safe and effective, and he knew it was a poison, and they told him to keep his mouth shut or he'd lose his house, what would I want him to do? I would want him to get up on the roof of the loudspeaker and tell everyone, don't drink the water, they're poisoning it. And if they come and burn his house down, I would want him to come and live in my house. So I'm doing everything I can to take care of Canadians. And I'm still working hard. I haven't taken a vacation since this started. And I'm grateful for everything that you guys are doing. And I have no idea. A lot of it is. I have no idea. Maybe you've read, everyone's in kind of a chain here, right? Like maybe I'm studying scientific work and then I'm explaining it. Maybe you're taking it and go to your neighbor and saving their life. So I'm grateful for all that. But the maxims of law, if you have two laws, and Michael, I'm going to look at Michael for me and see if he's nodding his head. I believe there is a maxim of law, but it's a maxim of philosophy, and it's a maxim of common sense, and it's a maxim of morality, which is if you have two rules to follow, and they contradict each other, you must do what is more important. Case in point, you're a child. Your parents say to you, whatever you do, don't you let your little brother get hit by a car. And your parents also tell you, don't go out on the street when the light is yellow. But there you are, and you see your little sibling running out on the yellow light and a car about to hit it, and you run off and snag your little brother or sister off the road. You've disobeyed your parents. You went out on the road during a yellow light, but you did it because of a maxim of law, which is whatever you do, protect your little sibling. So the maximum of law in medicine is by no means to keep your license with the college. It's by no means to submit to a criminal scam to keep your license or so they don't write little dirty things about you on their website. And so I'm following the maxims, and I'm really grateful for all you guys doing what you're doing. And we're going to keep this up. And please, whatever you do, folks, I think my time is probably getting near the end here. Whatever you do, make sure you follow the work we're doing at the World Council for Health. Follow the work at Dr. Trozzi. Keep up to date on JFRAM. And take care of your family, because a doctor or a nurse in Canada who's got a license is not allowed to tell you the truth. And that's a dangerous thing for everybody. God bless you guys. Thanks for listening to me.
In Norfolk County, Ontario. Now Dean is making waves with his first feature-length documentary. Why can't we talk about this? A gripping look into the true stories of a man injured by the mRNA vaccine and the uncomfortable silence surrounding vaccine-related harm. So he's given a trailer to his film for me, which I don't think. Maybe we can show it. I don't know.
I think we have it queued up. I can hear you now.
Oh, you can hear me now.
I can hear you.
Did you hear the nice introduction I gave you?
Yeah, a little bit. The end of it. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, I talked about your amazing work, so that's
Well, thank
wonderful. I'm really, really happy that you can join us. And I just took the liberty of telling people that if they do want to come next Friday, that they can buy their tickets from me, and I'll let you know how many to hold aside, and then you don't have to pay Eventbrite, and we don't have to give up our information.
Great. Yeah. Appreciate that.
Over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, everybody, for having me here. I just is very excited to be here, and was great coming off the back of Mark's interview there, because he talked about, obviously he's in the front lines of all this, but he talked about a lot of issues and a lot of the doctors that we actually have in my film. So my film is called Why Can't We Talk About This? And how it came about is I live in a small town here about an hour and a half outside of Toronto. And I noticed that another gentleman that I kind of knew around town and another filmmaker, I noticed that he started to post things on his social media that he wasn't well. So I thought, well, this is interesting because what he's kind of describing but not really coming out to say is that he's got some kind of maybe a neurological issue. And I'm thinking maybe that I'm no doctor or anything, but I'm just reading headlines and what I see and thought, well, maybe this is vaccine injury. But I didn't say anything because I knew that he was quite pro-vaccines when they were handing them out. So I just waited patiently until one day he reached out to me and he said, look, I'm going through something and I've been trying to figure this out. My doctors and we're getting nowhere and they're kind of saying some things and not saying some things. And well, you're a filmmaker. Would you like to do a film on it? He says, I don't even know if there's something there, but okay, would you like to do it? And I thought, okay, this is interesting. I don't know if there's a story there, but I'll certainly come and interview you. You know, you're somebody that I know. And so I came and interviewed him, and it was tough because there was really nowhere to go afterwards. You know, when you're a filmmaker, you get that first interview, and then you start your journey investigating this story and trying to understand what's happening to him. And then I was getting a lot of barriers and experiencing some censorship online, and then of course friends and families, a lot of pressure, just having to sort of handle this project on my own and in silence, I guess, basically. And so I kind of, as we were slowly moving through the project, trying to see if we even had a story here, I was just getting roadblock after roadblock. And I said, oh my gosh, there's something like, this is not right. Like, why are we just not talking about this? This shouldn't be this outrageous. He's seriously injured. This should be a conversation. And so we just continued on making the story. So the movie's called Why Can't We Talk About This? And it's really about my friend Michael, who has a vaccine injury, and we follow his journey through the medical system, the Ontario medical system, and sort of dead end after dead end. Sort of doctors will say things off the record, but they won't say things on the record. And then from there, the film kind of moves through to what I experienced with a little bit of censorship, just nobody wanting to talk to me about this. And then it moves into the doctors that were reprimanded and lost their licenses. And then I had a breakthrough, and I got in touch with scientist Dr. Stephen Pellich, and he was able to explain the science of these shots to me. And he was just wonderful. And I thought once we got him, we just got momentum. And the tide was kind of changing, whereas there's a lot of people were talking, but in little pockets everywhere. And then we started to get connected, like this today, groups like this. And I just got to sort of meet new people. Dr. Chris Shoemaker is in the film. He talks about his experiences and what's happening to Michael a little bit because he does know Michael. Talk to Dr. David Speaker, and we get into the contamination and the DNA that's in these shots. And we get into the vaccine injury support program and what a cluster mess that is. And we also get our independent, we're lucky here in Norfolk County, we have an independent MPP, Bobby Ann Brady. And because she doesn't belong to a caucus and quite possibly was kicked out of her caucus for asking too many questions during COVID, she came on camera and she spoke. And, I tried to reach out to the Ontario College of Surgeons and Physicians, and they would not talk to me. I tried to talk to other spokespeople that were pro-vaccine. Timothy Caulfield comes to mind. He wouldn't talk to me. So basically what you have, I think, is like a very succinct look at sort of the Ontario experience, what we as Canadians were going through here. And then I juxtaposed all that with the messaging from Health Canada and our politicians who really let us down during this. I mean, for me, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, I'm a filmmaker, but I'm also a citizen here of this province. And, everyone wants to blame the pharmaceutical companies, and that's fine. But I'm like, I think they're always the given villain. The politicians, the government, the policymakers, they really let us down on this. They're the gatekeepers. And, my documentary kind of proves it. Like, barely anyone will talk to us. Barely anyone will, debrief on this. And so, you know, the story doesn't really have much of a happy ending. Michael himself now is in long-term care. He's got no plan. There's no rehab for him. He's with 90-year-olds. He's only a couple years older than me. And so that's where that is. And so we got the film done, and we got hurried to get it done kind of in election time, because I thought, hey, after going through the biggest thing in 100 years our nation and the world has gone through, clearly debriefing on COVID is going to be an election issue, right? Well, it wasn't. Didn't even, I heard on both sides, nobody even wanted to touch this or talk about that. So that was a real shocker. But I thought if I get my film out, at least we'll start talking. And that's what's happening. I mean, theaters have refused to play my film because they don't want, pushback from audiences. I've been basically canceled in my industry as far as the arts go. No one wants to really hire me because they think I'm automatically anti-vax and anti-science and all this. And even though I make it clear, it's just the mRNA vaccines. It's one gentleman's story. And I'm just doing what all good documentarians do, which is talk about taboo subjects and ask questions. And so that's been really disappointing for me to sort of experience that on my side, in my industry and in the art scene. But, we're building momentum. We're getting press, probably more press outside of Canada than inside Canada. But I feel like we're going to hit a tipping point where this is just like more meetings like this, meeting more people. This should just be a conversation, and we should be discussing this, and we should make sure that this doesn't happen again. So I would like to play you a trailer of the film. They're going to cue that up, and then we will listen to it. Ooh.
Hey Dean, it's Michael. How are you? I'm dealing with these spinal lesions, and I'm trying to go down the rabbit hole to figure out what's happening to me, and there's so little information out there about the vaccines and COVID and long COVID, and man, I'm just so tired all the time. And I'm wondering if you'd be interested in doing a documentary on what's happening to me right now. Give me a call, we can talk about this.
If anyone chooses to not get vaccinated, there will be consequences.
Ignore NACI, ignore anti-maskers, take that shot.
The average doctor that prescribed these vaccines, they actually made a lot of money.
And those who questioned and challenged the narrative were portrayed as dangerous and spreading disinformation.
They don't understand why it's happening. I think they do. They just don't want to admit it.
So the irony of Michael's story is that 7 years ago, he walked across Canada for a documentary. He made a documentary called Walking, Wisdom of the Road, and now he is paralyzed in long-term care. And so, yeah, and Michael is just one of many. We do feature some others in the documentary because as we got rolling, we started meeting more and more people. And then, of course, at the screenings that we do have, and promoting it and trying to post things, we get so many people reaching out. They know somebody, they themselves have been affected. And so, yeah, I'm feeling finally this might be bubbling up here, but it's been a journey, that's for sure. So I'm not sure if you have any questions or anything.
Does anybody have any questions for Dean? Marianne?
Hi, Dean. I'm wondering when you started to do your documentary. What year was it?
We started January 2024, I believe.
Okay, thank you. We will look forward, many of us will look forward to meeting you for real next Friday night at the Zodiac, is it? No.
Zoetic Theater, I guess, yeah.
Zoetic Theater on Concession
Street in Hamilton.
It's one showing, yes. One showing.
Yeah.
We've got a comment from the audience that you're doing very important work, and I think probably everybody here appreciates it.
Well, thank you.
Can you hear the applause? Good.
And thank you for your support, because honestly, a lot of us are doing this. We feel like we're in a vacuum, and it's a vacuum of our colleagues that are not there and our friends and family too. So
I think probably we would all agree. That's one of the reasons I keep getting us together, so we don't feel, we try to get together monthly. Dave, you've got a question? Yeah, what was the cost to make it, Dean, and how did you get it funded?
there was no funding.
Yeah.
There is no funding. There is no
We better
sponsorship.
come and buy our ticket.
Please, yes. It's self-funded and just blood, sweat, and tears, and about a year and a half's worth of work, definitely, in this.
We've heard many of those stories in this fight or this journey that we're on. Is Michael ready to come to the? So Mark Trozzi is Dean. If I don't know whether you want to stay, maybe there'll be some questions for you in our discussion. But now we're going to have some questions and answers for Michael Alexander, and there's Mark. Can you hear us this time, Mark?
I can, yes.
Excellent. Oh, we've got a great technical guy here. So come on up, Michael. And Michael's going to lead.
Yeah, and also, I didn't talk about the Hartman case, but I sent you a note for those who are on the Justice for Medicine newsletter. So if you have questions about the Hartman case, I can also go into that. You remember Sean Hartman? He's a young hockey player, 17 years old, dropped dead after his second shot at home. And the court refused to dismissed his case brought by his father. So we can talk about that if you'd like to know more about it, but I got a couple of questions back here. Yeah. All right, so Sean Hartman, Sean Hartman was 17 years old. He was a hockey player. He was told he had to take the shots to continue playing hockey in his league. So he, after a second shot, his father found him unconscious in his bedroom one morning, and he had passed. There was no saving him. So the father's on a campaign for justice, understandably, and he collaborated with a lawyer from BC who put on, I think, a very strong case here in Ontario. And the court said that it's a little hard to explain what the court said. The father was suing the federal government for wrongfully approving the medication and without disclosing the full risks and the full side effect profiles, which the government knew about. So you see, under the emergency, and so I'm just trying to make this clear because it's one of these things and lots of well complicated. The minister was empowered by a regulation under the Food and Drugs Act to approve medications during a public health emergency based on his or her own subjective assessment of evidence. So normally, if you want a medication approved at Health Canada, it goes through a very long due diligence process, and it's based on objective criteria. But under this order or regulation, the minister could make, in this case, her own decision based on her assessment of whatever evidence was put in front of her. And in this case, it was the Pfizer and Moderna 6-month clinical trial studies, which we all know were very deficient and minimal. So on that basis, the government went forward with, I think it was it Hadju? I've forgotten the name of the minister. Who? Patty Hadju? Yes, right. So that's where they started with the safe and effective propaganda. The ministers approved it. It must be safe and effective. The shot is good for everyone. But Sean's father said, no, you had information in the studies that were given indicating that there was a risk of myocarditis for males under 40 and heightened risk for teenage boys. And you didn't disclose that. And the court ruled that because the minister had complete discretion, the minister was making something like a political decision or a policy decision that would normally be made by a politician in government. And this analogy breaks down. Just let me explain to you what the court said. The court said that the minister, under this order, during a public health emergency, had a duty to act for the greater good, for the good of the majority of the population. If in the course of recommending this shot for the majority of the population, people were injured or died, that's fine. That power to act for the greater good also means that you can act for the greater good at the expense of the minority. So the court said she was not obliged to disclose the information about the dangers of the shot to young people like Sean Hartman. So the government can willfully deceive you and lie to you and actually engineer your own death. It's an extraordinary decision. But to analogize the minister's powers under this regulation to a political decision, that this analogy breaks down. You see, because the idea is that with every political or policy decision, there are winners and losers. So if you elect a government to put more money into say, education, so there's going to be less money for law enforcement, less money for healthcare, people are going to die. People are going to be injured because of that policy choice. It happens in government all the time. Policies are chosen. There are winners and losers. Some people are harmed by the choices. But that's how our political process works, assuming the charter or some other law is not being violated. Yeah. Right. So Ed's point is that, yeah, I mean, the evidence now is that the majority of people, we know the majority of people were injured. I mean, I took one shot. Maybe I was injured before I woke up and decided not to take any more. But we know this is so, but this case went forward just on the issue of the risk to the information they had about the risk to young men. So it was that information would have been available to them generally, but not within the context of this case. So that's why they didn't argue that it hurt everybody. They were going for this specific in order to make the case for damages. So it'd be very clear and specific. Right. But you see, the minister's decision is not like a policy decision where there are winners and losers. How could anybody? There are no winners and losers when it comes to sharing information. Who would have been harmed if the minister had told people like Sean Hartman that there was a danger if they took the shot? See, there's no trade-off there. There are no winners and losers. There is no choice to be made in terms of time and scarce resources. Information is free. Sharing it doesn't cost anyone anything. So this analogy between a political decision where there are winners and losers and the minister's decision doesn't hold up. So the reasoning behind the decision is just completely incongruous. And they're planning to appeal. I wish them luck. Well, issues of public law are heard in the civil law system. And here in Ontario, it's the Divisional Court that deals with those. So it's a subdivision of the Superior Court. So all this occurs within the civil court system. So
So where are the courts for men and women? Because you're going into
Right.
citizen.
Well, okay. So this is a really profound question. You see, you make
Where men and women get justice.
yeah. Well, that's a question. I think it's a profound question, and justice is the right word because we have laws, and then we have the idea of justice. The idea of justice is universal.
Laws meaning legislation.
Uh, Decisions, of course, and legislation.
Legislation.
So we have the law, but we also have an idea of justice that's supposed to inform them. And the idea of justice is something that is not limited to a particular citizen, but is something universal. I mean, the right to freedom of expression is not something we say that just belongs to Canadians. We have a charter, a guarantee of free expression because we believe that is a human right. It belongs to all human beings.
Crown only has jurisdiction over fiction. All that's paid is a legal fiction that they need to create joinder to enforce legal services that masquerade as law.
Well, my challenge as a lawyer is to work within that system and get them to recognize the first principles of justice, the first principles of justice that should inform the law. That's the approach that we have taken.
Man cannot fit into the legal system. Man cannot fit in there. It is for persons only. And a person is a registered citizen of Quebec. So where can men and women, lawful men and women, get a court of adjudication that isn't specifically Crown jurisdiction or Crown subject matter and an adjudication?
But our courts have the jurisdiction to make rulings on issues of first principles of justice. Yes.
Courts have jurisdiction over administrative things from the federal level and the provincial level.
Mm-hmm.
And people in agreement that have signed on to Crown jurisdiction, and people are signing on to Crown jurisdiction, which is via the birth certificate.
So I don't really understand the concept of Crown jurisdiction. Yeah.
Has she been 8 months with that day now?
No, she has been 6 months with that day.
Okay.
But under our existing system, right, under our existing system, you can make arguments that transcend what the law currently gives you.
Law is not an argument. Law is meeting with your adversary and coming to remedy. Courts are about administering public security only. Registered public security.
Well, there are lots of decisions that wouldn't fall into that category. RB Sundal.
It's a person case. They go in applying as citizen. Crown subject matter.
Yes, you as a citizen, you have to be a citizen to enter into the jurisdiction of the court. But once you're within the jurisdiction of the court, you can make arguments that transcend your identity as a citizen.
Joiner and breach of Crown law.
Yeah.
It is. I'm wondering.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Did who? Did King Charles get the vaccine? I don't know, but I would only speculate that he did not. Yeah. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I haven't looked into the BC situation for a couple of years now. But they did bring in some pretty heavy duty legislation that puts doctors in particular under the thumb of the government, even more so here in Ontario. Because there are penalties, prior to revocation, there are other penalties that you can suffer for disagreeing with the College of Physicians on certain things, or with the government on certain matters of public health. That wouldn't surprise me because, Mark's case really does stand for the proposition that if you're a member of a professional college, you give up your right to free expression when you join the college. That's the general proposition you take away from it. What's interesting, there's just no foundation for that opinion in the judgment. The judgment is written, a lot of these judgments are written by judges who believe in professional regulation. They may have been benchers with the Law Society. They may have held executive positions at the Law Society. These are true believers in the system. So they are predisposed or biased towards self-regulation as an absolutely glorious thing, and those who are involved with it can do no wrong. Well, if you're in Alberta, you'll want to separate and start over again. But we have the most effective solutions will be political. So the Regulated Health Professions Act, which has allowed all this now to us here in Ontario, it's about 100 pages long. But if I were Minister of Justice and I had a mandate to make amendments, with 2 pages of amendments to that 100-page legislation, I could stop this kind of thing from ever happening again. Well, you have to have a political party, and you have to have people who are willing to stand up for what's right and to make legislative changes. And we don't have that. We don't have a media that doesn't do its job. Obviously, it's just right. It's propaganda for the government. It's been bought off by the government. Our parties in Ontario, we have the uniparty here. The uniparty is a huge problem. So this is why Derek Sloan, so people like Derek Sloan are trying to build a new political party, a new political coalition to make these changes. Well, I had this conversation with friends of mine who had younger kids, and so I say to them, well, given everything that's happened, what are you going to tell your kids? How are you going to lead a good life in the midst of all this? And I think there are probably a couple of things you can say. One is buy into the system, make as much money as you can as quickly as you can. If you have to work for BlackRock, work for BlackRock, and get your island, buy yourself some privacy. Or you can take a stand against it, but there's a price to be paid for that. If you win, it'll be glorious, but be prepared to lose. It won't be glorious at all. You can make those 2 choices, to be part of the system and then get out as soon as you can. Or to take another path. But I think it's very important that everybody has a job that allows them to survive. And that's going to be one of the big challenges going forward. Because you have to survive before you can play.
Okay, so let me interrupt for a second. This is a wonderful part about being able to stay and have dinner and mingle, because we can expand upon these conversations. Mark would like to know if there's any more questions for him, and Marianne has one. If there's any specific questions for Mark, I'd like to get them on the table now so we can release him and let him get on with his family.
Hi, Mark. I was wondering if they're closer to finding out why some people are more susceptible to getting vaccine damage. And also, do you recommend that everybody who's taken the shot do a detox, or just the people that seem to be most effective?
Well, thanks, Marianne. So I'll start with the latter question. Yes, I think so. I'm doing some research with a group in the US, and we're looking at clinical data on actually thousands of people following their injection with this genetic experiment at best. And at least in that population, which could be the lots they served in this particular state where we're doing the research, but we see damage in almost everybody, and particularly like deteriorating immune systems. And you could see like the levels of normal antibodies and lymph like cells of the immune system coming down before the people start to have symptoms. And I think we're into a chronic phase of this injection outcome, and we're seeing a lot of autoimmune disease. And if you looked at the work I wrote when I talked about ribosome frame shifting and how that creates this whole other plethora of autoimmune disease. So I think everybody that took a shot should be doing what they can. I think we, like the doctors and scientists working on this, we got to keep working hard because we don't have all the answers yet. And some of this stuff, I mean, we don't even know what to do yet. if at all, about what do you do when someone's literally had foreign genetic code like SV40 promoters enhancers inserted into their genetic code. And we have evidence of that. We already have laboratory cellular evidence of that. So having said that, people do a lot better with the sort of detox things, the intermittent fasting, use of ivermectin in specifically some types of cases, nattokinase, NAC. And I've put out videos on this, and I'm coming out with a whole new, I've got so much work on it. I should publish a book, but anyways, there's lots available on how to do that. And then the next question is, why are some people more susceptible? Well, I think there's a variety of reasons. So one is, what did they get injected with? Because they weren't all the same. And they weren't all the same partly based on manufacturing. For instance, when we looked at the lots where they did the best job of constructing the pegylated nanoparticle that delivers the genetic payload into the cells, the better they manufactured that particle, the more people died and had more adverse events. So in other words, if your injection was well made, it would be more likely to hurt you faster. Another element is how the shots were handled. You could get lucky and have the shots weren't handled properly, and you just got a shot of sludge that had fallen apart, which isn't good for you, but it's a lot different than having intact genetic insertion into your cells. And then individual variants, there's going to be a couple of reasons for individual variants. And I mean, one will be the uptake of the particles, the uptake of the genetic payload. But the other thing is, and Dr. Hodkinson, my friend, has spoken about this as a pathologist, all of our organs, I mean, I don't want to be pessimistic. I'm very much for natural health and let's all get super healthy. But at the same time, our organs do age. One of the ways they age is microvascular clotting. Little by little, the tiny blood vessels, the arteries get plugged up with atherosclerosis, and organs deteriorate. But they have to deteriorate to a threshold level before you have symptoms. So, for instance, let's say my kidneys were running at 90%. Let's say my kidneys took a toxic aspect from these injections, which is common, and my kidneys start to deteriorate, partly based on this microvascular clotting. Well, my kidneys are going to have to get bad enough down to a point where it creates symptoms. So if I start with 60% kidney function, my kidney failure is going to show up sooner than if I start with 90%. Or if I'm a young person with full mental function, the deterioration of my brain tissue is going to show up slower than it would if I'm an elderly person who already has some microvascular dementia. So that's a part of it. And Rennie Dancourt's work and a lot of data from around the world shows that, which is, the shots injured and killed all age groups, but they were especially good at injuring and killing the elderly because they were already fragile. So these are some of the reasons. Now, are there going to be other reasons? Like, for instance, some people lack methylation ability, and the ability to methylate a variety of things, including B vitamins, is very important. And so that could be some of the other factors. And I think we'll know a lot more. I know the research I'm working on, we'll know a lot more in about 2 or 3 months, and we'll try to publish it rather than get shot for doing it.
Mark, it would be way nicer to have you here, but it sure is amazing to have you here at our event, answering our questions and talking to us personally. To the live stream audience, I wonder if there are any questions, and we think that we might be able to answer some. So if there's anybody that's still with us in the live stream audience, no? Doesn't appear so? Okay. Well, then, Mark, I'll give you a great, big, huge thank you. He can hear our applause, so let's hear it. That's great. And Dean, we'll give you a great, big thank you. So I hope, how many are going to be seeing Dean next week? Are there going to be many? Good. And if you want, as we said, what's the price of the tickets? Is it $20? Okay, so if anybody gives me $20 in their name, you'll have their ticket set aside for next week. Unless they want to do it through Eventbrite, that's fine too. Enjoy the rest of the weekend, Mark, and thank you, and you too, Dean.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Okay.